I'm going to show you 9 heroes from the Tanach, the Bible, who went on incredible journeys that changed them forever and that ultimately changed the world. And I want you to guess who they are. So let's start with this one. He has tents in the background. He lived in tents, and he has a knife. Think Genesis 22, someone who raised a knife. Avraham, his journey started in Ur-Kasdim in Mesopotamia, and took him up to Haran with his dad actually and his family. And then after he lost his father, he continued the journey over to Canaan. Eventually went down to Egypt and then came back up to Canaan. All right, I'm going to show you another person, and if you want to play the guessing game part, just pause the video and you can spend as much time as you want thinking about it and guessing. And if you don't want to guess, just let the video play, and I will show you these people and give you the answers. Somebody with a staff, somebody who crossed the Jordan with just a staff in his hand, somebody who came back with a big family, and ultimately had to lean on his staff when he walked because he became somewhat crippled. Jacob's journey took him to Padan Aram, where his dad came from, and where his father's family still was, and his journey took him back from Padan Aram, and then later down to Egypt. You can't get this one wrong. Joseph, and you can see his silver diviner's cup here too, just as a little hint. Okay, so Joseph's journey took him down to Egypt, and then all the way down to prison in Egypt, and then all the way up to the royal palace to second in command. Moses' journey took him from Egypt to Midian and back, and then through the Red Sea to Sinai, and then through the wilderness all the way to the edge of Canaan. Ruth's journey took her to Moab and back. David's journey took him all over Israel as he fled from Saul, then down to Gath in Philistia and back all the way up to the throne. And he later also took a journey when he was fleeing from Absalom, and that brought him back too. Think a leather belt, rough clothes, a mantle. This is Elijah. Elijah's journey took him across the Jordan to the Cherith Brook, then up to Zarephath and Sidon, then all the way to Mount Carmel, and then all the way down to Mount Sinai, then up and over to Damascus, and finally to the sky in a chariot of fire. Jonah's journey, he was hoping would take him to Tarshish, but instead it took him down into the ocean, down into the belly of a sea monster, and then all the way to Nineveh. Esther's journey took her from her childhood home to the royal throne in the palace of the world superpower of her time. So all of these heroes from our tradition, they went on journeys that changed them forever, journeys that gave them a story that we're still telling today. And I'm going to show you 9 more that went on journeys of one kind or another, and I want you to guess who they are also. But firstly, I just want to say hi. My name is Izzy Avraham, and welcome to this introductory video. It's the first of 3 videos introducing you to our Biblical Heroes Journey course taught through the Mussar Center. So let's go ahead now, and we'll just keep going with this. All right, so you can probably guess who these are. Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava. And their journey took them from the Garden of Eden to east of Eden. And, their journey took not just them, but us, their descendants, all of humanity, on a journey that we're still on, a journey on which we haven't yet reached our destination. Noah's journey took him through the flood and then back to the same world, but very different. Job's journey wasn't so much of an outward journey as it was an inward journey. Isaac's journey took him to the mountains of Moriah and back. Hagar's journey took her to the wilderness of Beersheba and back. Gideon's journey took him on a battle with Midian that eventually took him across the Jordan River and back. Samson's journey took him down to Philistia, and then back and forth until finally his journey ended in Philistia. Hannah's journey took her to the Mishkan, the tabernacle in Shiloh, and back. And finally, the journey of Daniel and his friends took them to Babylon, all the way to the royal court, all the way, in the case of Daniel's friends, into the fiery furnace and back, all the way, in the case of Daniel, down into the lion's den and back. So once again, you can see in all of these stories, maybe not journeys that were so big in the sense of going somewhere and then coming back, but they all went somewhere. In most cases, it was a real journey, and as you saw in some cases, it was an inward journey. Now, what's really remarkable about all of these stories is that these journeys they follow, in most cases they followed something of a they followed something of a similar pattern. And so our heroes started out at home, and home was everything that was comfortable, that was safe, that was familiar, and then they left home. They went on a journey, and they ventured forth into the unknown. Sometimes this was by choice. For instance, think of Abraham would be a great example, setting out for Canaan, or think of Ruth, setting out for Moab and back. But more often, their journeys were not by choice. Think of Joseph being sold into slavery and taken down to Egypt, or think of Esther really being forced to marry the king. In so many of these stories, their journeys climaxed with an encounter that changed them forever. Think of Jacob wrestling at Peniel, or Job when God spoke to him from the whirlwind. And then, after our heroes set out on these journeys, leaving home and venturing forth into the unknown and having some kind of an encounter, they returned home, and new and different, but still the same person. And most importantly, with something that would change the world. So for instance, think of Elijah returning from Horeb, from Mount Sinai, with a new mission that ultimately would take down the evil regime. Or think of Hannah returning from Shiloh with the promise of a baby. So you can see here that in many of these stories, there were 4 legs of the journey, 4 stages, so to speak. And what's remarkable is in just how many of these stories our heroes had the same experiences in each of these stages. So I want to show those to you. So let's start with with home. So once again, home is predictable, it's stable. There's no real need for change, and that's where most of our stories start. They start at home, normal life with their families. So for example, think of David, just shepherding sheep out there in the country. Just another day in the life of David. Or think of Adam and Eve taking care of the garden. And then the stories don't end there with normal life, with another day in the life of. There's a call. And sometimes that call is divine. Think of Moses and the burning bush. But more often, that call came in the form of a crisis. Chaos breaking into their ordered lives. For instance, think of the edict to kill all the Jews in the story of Esther. And that's what starts our heroes off on their journeys. Now, I guess if it's a crisis, it's not surprising that there's resistance. We're like, no, I want to go back to normal life. I just want to go home. But even in the case of divine calls, you see resistance. Think of Moses asking Hashem, God, to send somebody else. Think of Jonah literally running in the opposite direction, trying to take a ship to Tarshish. There's resistance. And then in many of these stories, there was a mentor that showed up, an older man or woman that helped them on their way. Think of Mordecai in the story of Esther, for instance, encouraging her. Perhaps you've been brought to the throne for such a time as this. Or think of Eli. When Samuel heard this voice calling him, he literally was called. He heard the call, and yet he didn't really know what it was. Maybe in his case it wasn't resistance so much as confusion. And Eli was the mentor who showed up and who said, next time you hear that, say, speak, for your servant is listening. And that was what propelled Samuel on his journey. And so in all these cases, it leads into the next stage, the actual journey, which usually began with something of a crossing over. So, going from the order of home into the chaos of the unknown. And so when they crossed over, there was no going back. Think of Israel after the Red Sea closed. There was no going back to Egypt. Or think of Noah when God closed the door. There was no going back to the old world. And along the way, on the journey, our heroes encountered allies and friends, and they also encountered enemies and opponents. For instance, think of the story of David, who was the friend? Well, that was Jonathan. Who was the opponent? Well, that was Goliath. Or think of the story of Elijah. He had an ally in the widow of Zarephath. He had enemies in the prophets of Baal. And along the way on the journey, our heroes also encountered challenges, trials and tests, temptations along the way. For instance, think of Joseph being tempted by Potiphar's wife. Or think of Moses and Aaron in their showdown with Pharaoh's magicians. So towards, as they continued on the journey, often there was this approach as they got closer to the encounter, to the confrontation, whatever that might have looked like in each story. But there was this approach when they got closer to the unknown outcome, when they began to prepare for that encounter. For instance, think of Jacob separating his family into two camps. Think of Ruth sneaking up to lie down at the feet of Boaz, literally approaching, and that was what led into the encounter, and really it was this stage of the journey where the highs and the lows, the highest and the lowest points happened. And this was when our heroes were transformed forever, when they were initiated into something new. The most intense part of that was the battle. These battles were life or death ordeals, facing the ultimate other in high-risk confrontations. Sometimes this was a literal villain that was faced, but sometimes it was almost transcendent. For instance, think of Isaac when he was bound and the knife was raised. Or think of Boaz facing the kinsman redeemer. Whatever the battle might have looked like in each of these stories, after they survived the ordeal or won the battle or just made it through this confrontation, there was some kind of a reward. They got something, they experienced something that made it all worth it. For instance, Jacob received a new name. David took Goliath's sword. Jonah was told that Nineveh would be spared. And there was also a union, some kind of a union in many of these stories. Sometimes this was a reconciliation, or sometimes it was a literal marriage. And in these cases, it had the feel that the hero went from somehow broken or incomplete to whole and fulfilled. Sometimes, on a physical level, sometimes on a heart level. And often, of course, these have a lot of overlap. So, for instance, if you think about reconciliation, think about Jacob being reconciled with Esau. What a moment of relief. Or think of Joseph being reunited with his father. I'm sure tears flowed. Or if you think of union in the sense of marriage, think of Ruth and Boaz. Or think of God and Israel in the Mishkan, the tabernacle. So towards the end of this encounter stage and experience, there often was a callback. A pull back home to ordinary life, a need to come down again from the mountain. So, for instance, think of Hagar when the angel says, go back and submit to Sarah. Or think of Elisha standing there, staring into the sky after Elijah was taken from him in a chariot of fire. And then he looks down, and there's Elijah's cloak. And that was his callback. It's time to turn around and return, go back across the Jordan. There's a mission that yet lies before him. And that really leads into the last of our four stages in the journeys of these heroes of ours. Just like their journeys began with a crossing over into the unknown, now they're crossing back into the familiar. And in both cases, they cross over and there's no turning back at that point. They're coming home, in all these cases, they're coming home the same person, but but different, with something new to change the world. They're crossing back from chaos to order. And, for instance, think of Israel crossing the Jordan back into Canaan under Joshua. Or think of David crossing the Jordan to return to the throne in his capital city after fleeing from Absalom. Now, what's interesting in many of these stories is there was a final test. This was when evil reared its head one last time, or when the change was finalized. It was shown to be real, that the person really had changed. If you want to think about the final test as a temptation, sometimes the end was good and sometimes it wasn't. Think of Noah, for instance, after everything that happened and he ended up drunk in his tent. Or think of David after everything he went through and he ascended the throne, and then his moral failure with Bathsheba. But it wasn't always bad. Sometimes it became apparent that the change was real. Think of Joseph, for instance, after his father died and his brothers were terrified that he had never really forgiven them and that he was going to kill them. But no, he actually had really forgiven them. The change was real. Or think, for instance, of Esther when she instituted Purim, and it was like this the journey that she had gone on with the Jewish people was crystallized for all time in the celebration of Purim. And then finally, the return culminates in a homecoming back to the old world, but as a new person, often very climactic. Think of Jacob coming home to his father Isaac. Or think of Naaman and his journey to Israel, returning home healed from his leprosy. And in all of these cases, our heroes' journeys conclude with they're home, but they're different. So think of Joseph surrounded by his Egyptian and Hebrew families. Think of Ruth and Boaz having their baby, or think of David reigning from Jerusalem. So I want you to notice something in all of these experiences that many of our heroes had on their journeys. Some of these experiences were actually people. Maybe you did notice that already. So for instance, let's count them. So firstly, you have the hero who starts at home, goes on this journey, and usually returns. That's number one. Number two, we have the mentor. And then numbers 3 and 4, we have allies and enemies. And then number 5, there's the battle with the villain, the bad guy of the story, the ultimate other. And then number 6, there's usually a union with the partner. And so really right there you have 6 roles being played, characters. And if you unpack it a little bit more, in general they're actually 8. And I'm going to show those to you. So this is the male version. I'll show you the female version in a second, and we're just going to go through these. So the first 4, you have the hero, and then those who are with the hero. So you have the hero himself, the main character. Think of David. We know more about his first person experiences than probably anyone else in Scripture because of all of his poetry in the Psalms. Very, very raw and intensely personal. And then you have the mentor, the old man who fills the role of a father figure. Often, for instance, think of Jethro to Moses. And then you have the ally or the friend, often filling more of a sibling role, a younger person. Think of Jonathan to David or Elisha to Elijah, for instance. And then you also have the divine. You have God out there in the distance, mysterious, but somehow guiding the hero on the journey, and very involved. And I'll show you the female version of this and give you some more examples. So once again you have the hero playing the central role. Think of Ruth, for instance. We have a whole book about her and about her journey, telling the story of her journey to becoming a wife and a mother. And then you have once again the mentor playing a more motherly role. Think of Naomi, for instance, to Ruth. And you also have the ally, often, once again, playing more of a younger sibling role. And there aren't so many examples of this in the Tanach, the Bible, but one that I think of is Yael to Deborah. So, we don't know that they were friends or that they ever even met each other, but they definitely, Yael was an ally to Deborah, and what Deborah started, Yael finished. So that would be one example possibly. And then of course also once again we have Hashem, we have the divine out there in the distance, mysterious, and yet somehow involved and guiding the course of the story. All right, so if these four are the hero and those who are with him or her, then the other four are those who are across from the hero, facing him on the journey. And once again, I'll show you the female version in a second. Okay, so firstly, through male eyes, you have the partner, and this is someone who's the same but different. You're opposites, but you're also aligned with similar goals, and you end up sharing the journey together. So think of Abigail to David, for instance. She opposed him. She's like, "Don't do this." She tried to stop him, but she wasn't against him. She was actually for him. She was helping him. And then farther on, you have those who are facing the hero, who really are opposed to the hero, and against him. So firstly, you have the opponent. So the opponent is trying to stop you with physical force. Think of Goliath to David, for instance. And then behind the opponent, you have this shadowy figure, often called the trickster. So this would be the tempter or temptress. This would be the deceiver. And so whereas the opponent is more direct, trying to stop you with physical force, the trickster is indirect, trying to divert you with mental or emotional deception. Think, for instance, of Delilah to Samson, a great example there. And then finally, off in the distance, just like you have the divine off in the distance, on the horizon, so to speak, you also have the villain. So this is the ultimate enemy, the existential threat. In David's life, this was earlier in life, this was Saul, and then later it was Absalom. And so looking at the female version, I guess I should probably get out of the way here a little bit. Okay, so looking at the female version of this, you have the partner. You're the same but different. You're often opposites, but somehow you're also aligned. You have similar goals, and you end up sharing the journey together. And often there's some tension there. It's a push-pull relationship. Some entangling. Entangling can be bad, but can also be good. As your journeys become interwoven and shared. So, for instance, in Sarah's story, think of her relationship with Abraham. They shared the journey. They were in it together, but there were also some very strong tensions there sometimes. And then beyond the partner, there is the opponent. Think of Peninnah to Hannah, for instance, and beyond that, there's the trickster. For instance, think of Rachel and Jacob and their journey as they faced life together, and they had to face Laban. Laban was such a trickster character in the story. He's just so shadowy and constantly changing, like a shapeshifter almost. And then finally, off in the distance, there is the villain, the one who will be faced and confronted, with whom there will be a battle. And in this story of Esther, for instance, we all know who that was. That was Haman. All right. So those are the 16 experiences that many of our heroes had on their journeys. If you look at all of these journeys and you combine them, you see all of these experiences. And basically, that's what this course is going to be. We are going to do one video for each of these experiences on the hero's journey, and then, as you saw, some of these quote experiences are actually people. They're roles that are played, characters that show up along the way, and so we'll also do videos for each of the 8 characters, the hero and the 7 who show up along the way. And this is the biblical hero's journey. So as we look at these experiences and characters, we're gonna see where they are in the lives and stories of these heroes of ours from the Tanach, from the Bible. And these are some primary examples here that I already showed you, and then we also have some secondary examples here. And I only say secondary because in these stories they don't maybe have as many of these experiences that are often encountered on the hero's journey, but they definitely have some, and they're worth looking at. And we won't just be looking at these two sets of 9. We'll be looking at literally dozens of other stories in the Tanach where these experiences and these characters showed up. And as we take this journey together, one of the things you're going to see is that the Bible has the best stories that the world has ever seen or heard. And this is one of the ways that we can know that the Bible is true and that God is real, because nobody could make this stuff up. It shows that there is the depth and the complexity of these stories and the way they unfold and end. It tells us that if there are stories, there must be a storyteller. And if there are journeys where people go out and they face such experiences, but they come back again, there must be somebody there somehow guiding. And you'll don't take my word for it. You will definitely see it for yourself as we look at these characters for yourself. And I say for yourself because we're not just going to be talking about these people from ancient history. We're also going to be talking about you. I want you to find yourself and where you are on your own journey, because you are on a journey, whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not. In many of these cases, these heroes of ours were dragged on the journeys that they went on, and yet it was needful, and at the end it was worth it. And maybe it's like you. Have you ever been dragged on a journey you didn't want to take? How many of these experiences have you had, or which leg are you at right now in the journey of your own life? So we're definitely going to be we're going to be going there step by step, and helping you not just find yourself in your own journey, but also identify who the characters are in your story. Not just in the past either, but in the present. Who's filling these roles in your life right now? Who are these people in your life today, in the last year? So I think that's going to be a lot of fun, and it's also going to be very meaningful. If you've already studied with me through the Mussar Center, then you know what this is. This is the phloron, the floral heart, and we use this as our symbol for Mussar. Maybe you're familiar with that Hebrew word, maybe you're not. Basically, Mussar is it's the Hebrew word for inner work, working on yourself, growing in character, becoming whole, experiencing healing, growing up and becoming a mature individual. All of these things are part of Mussar. And and we're teaching this course through the Mussar Center. This is a Mussar course, but really it's focused on this hero's journey, this biblical hero's journey. And so we use this phloron, this floral heart, to represent Mussar work. And I'm not going to tell you all right now. I would say definitely, if you're interested, check out our biblical Mussar course. That's our foundational course. 50 videos. It's a veritable journey, a life-changing journey in and of itself right there. And you'll learn more about that. But so basically, I'm just kind of letting you know what this is. So basically, at the end of our Mussar conversations, I like to look at each of these videos as a conversation between you and me. So at the end of each one of these, I like to change gears and stop. And really just, we do 3 things. I give you, and that begins with giving you some kind of an exercise, maybe a set of exercises in the form of questions to engage with, or an assignment, something to do. It really depends on the content of the lesson. But basically, it's one of the ways that this isn't just entertainment or information that you see and hear. But it becomes something that changes you, and that's what Mussar is about. It's about change, about experiencing real transformation. So I'm actually going to give you a little 2 little assignments right now, and I really do hope that you'll take the time to engage with these, because if you do, basically you will get out of this course what you put into it. And so, if you spend some time, really authentically engaging with these exercises, it's just going to make your experience in this course so much better. Okay, so firstly, I introduced you to the 8 characters in every story, in the hero's journey. And we're going to be getting into this in more depth and detail in the upcoming videos. But for now, I just thought it would be fun to keep it light, and just give you this assignment to think about where these people are, where who these people are, who was playing these roles, who were these characters, on three levels. So firstly, in the Bible, we already talked about that some, and then secondly, in popular culture. For instance, movies, shows, whether they be single or multi-season, novels, and then thirdly, in your own life. And so you can spend as much or as little time on this as you want. Like I said, we're going to be spending more time on this in our upcoming videos. But I thought it would be fun for you to just begin to get a feel for this. And so I want you to basically just pause this video and go ahead and spend some time on this. And once again, just ask yourself, where are these? Who was or who is filling these roles? In the Bible, in pop culture stories, and in your own life. And once again, I'll just list those so that you can remember them. So you have the hero, the mentor, the ally, and the divine. And then across from the hero, facing him or her, you have the partner, the opponent, the trickster, and the villain. All right, so go ahead and spend as much or as little time on that as you want. All right, so I hope that was a really, really fun time for you, and maybe you're just really beginning to see your own life in the light of these stories and these people who show up in pretty much every story. All right, so you could probably guess what your second exercise is. It's the same thing basically, but I want you to go ahead and we looked at these 16 experiences that so many of our heroes had on their journeys. And once again, they were on journeys, you're on a journey, and then most of the best stories in popular culture, movies, shows, even like multi-season shows and novels, many of them are modeled very closely after the biblical hero's journey. They'll never tell you, oh yeah, this is the original hero's journey from the Bible, but it is. And so basically, I'm just going to have you do this. I'm going to have you do the same thing, just making sure you can see everything there. Okay, good. So I'm going to have you do the same thing, and just go ahead and pause me and identify these 4 stages and these 16 experiences on these 3 levels. Stories, your favorite stories from Tanach, stories from popular culture, maybe your favorite movie or the show that you found most compelling, that you completely lost yourself in, and that you were kind of like really disappointed afterwards when it was over, or when they didn't continue it to the next season. And then finally, in your own life. So I know that's a lot, right? So spend as much or as little time on this as you want, but I just want you to begin to familiarize yourself with these experiences, with these legs of the journey, and begin to see them in the stories that you most love. All right. So I hope that was a worthwhile exercise for you. So that wasn't too much, right? Just 2 exercises. Finding these 8 characters, finding these 16 experiences on those 3 levels. The stories from the stories of Scripture, stories from pop culture, and then also your own story. So this was actually the first of 3 intro videos. I'm going to tell you briefly what the next 2 are going to be about. So the next one is going to be about story, basically, and the elements that every story needs to be a great story. And you're going to see these in stories from Scripture, once again, stories from pop culture, and definitely they are there in your own story. And definitely we can even see all of these in the big story that began in the book of Genesis and moved onward throughout Scripture and is still unfolding today. So there's some big stuff there. Can't wait to have you join me for that. And then also I'm going to in the 3rd video I'm going to talk about how the hero's journey and all the stuff about story relates to Mussar in 3 ways actually. So, there's actual inner work. How is this about inner work? How does really getting into this stuff help you work on yourself and specifically and change? Because each of these 16 experiences are somehow related to the hero's journey that transforms them forever. The whole point of the hero's journey is they come back the same person, but different. They've been changed, and they come back with something to change the world. And that's what Mussar is all about. It's about, you work on yourself to change, to become the person that you want to be, that you could be. And also you work on yourself so that you can become the kind of person who will make a difference in the world. Secondly, every great story is usually about one big midah, and that's the Hebrew word for a character quality, the attributes of God, virtues, all of this stuff. Generally speaking, every story will be about one big midah, and working on yourself is all about growing in character. And we call that midot, right? Midot are character qualities, and so there's a very strong connection there. And then thirdly, Mussar is about growing up. It's about becoming a mature individual, and we definitely see that in the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is like a rite of passage. It's an initiation into something new. And so regardless of your age, this will be useful to you. But I really want this course to especially be for younger people who are just getting started in life. Maybe you're preparing for your bar or bat mitzvah, which is a real rite of passage. It's an initiation. That's a great start, but you're also going to have experiences that are there to help you grow up, to become a mature individual, and that will initiate you. And if you're familiar with the hero's journey, then when these things come your way, you'll be like, oh, I know what this is, and I can face it. And you can also appreciate the experiences a little bit more. When you know that the call often comes as a crisis, then when crises come into your life, you don't just freak out or just curl up in the fetal position and cry and because you're like, okay, I know what's going on right now, and there's a God, and I'm living out a story, and so I'm going to rise to this occasion, and I'm going to take this journey. So basically, these are some of the different ways that we're going to talk about in our third intro video, how Mussar is just so closely connected to story and to the hero's journey. And along the way, I'm also going to give you some technical notes in the videos 2 and 3, introduce you to some technical terms. Also tell you where these observations came from, like the 8 characters. Tanach never really says, well, there are 8 characters in every great story, or the Tanach is never like, oh yeah, the hero's journey, here are the 16 experiences. It's all there in these kind of unspoken patterns. But it's never really spelled out. So where did this come from? Who discovered this stuff? How did they connect all the dots, right? So I will get into that also, and just kind of share some of my sources with you, where I got some of this from. And as far as I know, by the way, this is the first course that has ever been taught on really combining the hero's journey with these stories of Scripture. And so this really is some pioneering work. It's cutting edge. And if you ask me, it's very exciting. So basically, this is the first of 3 intro videos. It's up to you. You could do all 3 right now. I'm trying to keep them a little bit shorter instead of smudging them into one big video, which unfortunately can be a weakness of mine. So I'm kind of stopping and breaking it up into 3. So you can do all 3 right now, or you can do 1 a week, or whenever you do your Mussar work, whenever you do these lessons, that part is all up to you. Okay, so basically, now you know what this video is going to be about, what the next 2 intro videos are going to be about, and just what this course is going to be about. I showed you the fleuron, the floral heart, and I mentioned to you that at the end of each of these conversations we do 3 things, but then I only gave you the first one. So the first one was I give you exercises in the form of questions, or maybe some assignments, whatever. So we did that. So go you, go us, right? Yay. And speaking of go you and go us and yay, that's actually what the second thing is that we like to do, is we like to finish with some celebration. It's good to just stop and just be like, wow, what did you learn that was most exciting? And so I'm kind of saying that that's what we do, and so that's just what we're going to do right now. So this is almost like a little exercise in and of itself, but really it's just something that we can kind of think about together. So like what are you celebrating right now? If I could say Mazel Tov to you, congratulations, what would it be about? What did you learn? What did you experience? Did this kind of start you on some kind of a journey? Maybe, I don't know. So it's just good. So feel free to, I don't know, just let yourself feel the good feels and talk about that. And maybe you're watching this video by yourself. You probably are. But I would like you to change that if possible. You are going to get the most out of this course if you don't take this journey by yourself. Remember, the hero doesn't take the journey by himself or herself. There are friends and allies along the way. So why not take this journey with a friend or with a couple of friends? The Hebrew word for a friend, for let's say that you have a study partner in your Mussar work. That's called a chavruta. Often in more Ashkenaz pronunciation, it's a chavrusa. Maybe you could find a chavrusa, somebody who would take this journey with you. I mentioned somebody's. Maybe you can find even more than one person, and you can start a little group, and do these videos together, and just talk about them afterwards. Do the exercises after, with the questions and stuff. If you wanted to start a group, the Hebrew word for that is a va'ad. And not that you have to use the Hebrew words, right? But if you're into it, if you're into it, you can call your study partner your chavrusa, and you can call, if you start a group, you can call it your va'ad. All right, so those are Mussar terms, right? Okay, but anyways, if possible, I really do hope that you could do that. It's definitely, like I said, it's gonna make it more worth it, and you're gonna have more fun, and it'll be more meaningful. And whatever changes you experience as we work together through all this stuff, it's gonna stick. It's gonna last longer, and you want that, right? Okay, so, and also, like, even right now, it's like, it's always funner celebrating with other people than celebrating by yourself. You know what I mean? So, you can like give each other a slap on the back and be like, Mazel Tov to you for whatever you experienced, whatever you're excited about, that kind of thing, right? Smiles, laughter, together. All right. So anyways, that's the big idea behind celebration in these conversations. And so now we'll move on to the third thing, the thing that we're going to finish this video with, and that is a blessing. And I know it feels a little bit presumptuous for me to give you a blessing. I unfortunately, I don't know who you are necessarily who's watching this. If you ever want to reach out with your, your responses and your experiences from these videos, I always love hearing from people who are studying with the Mussar Center. Would love to hear from you. But at this point, I probably don't know who you are. But you know what? I do want this to feel like a real relationship, like a conversation between friends. And so, not as somebody over you, but as a friend, somebody who is sharing this journey with you. I want to offer a blessing in the sense of what my hope is for you, some good wishes for you. And if I could do that, do that in a humble and in a real way. And I really think about these blessings too. I try to not just say something cliche or just kind of obviously a blessing that you would give, like something surface. I really try to, I spend some time just so, really engaging with this, And so after having done that, I want to bless you to realize something. I want to bless you to realize that you're not alone and that you never have been. You saw that there are people on the journey, and some of them are against you, but some of them are for you. And so there are people who have been for you. There are people who are there for you, and you're not alone, and you never have been. I want you to realize, I want to bless you to realize that you've had mentors along the way to give you what you needed to make it this far. And there's love behind that. And I want to bless you to feel that love, to feel loved. I also want to bless you to realize that you've had allies along the way, friends. They've made the journey more fun. Allies who have, helped you to, I don't know, to get where you wanted to go. Couldn't have made it without those allies. And really there's love behind that too. And most of all, I want to bless you to realize that there's always been a mysterious divine presence out there in your life too, on the journey. And that right now, there is a divine presence out there, a presence that's been keeping you alive to this day, that's sustained you thus far. And if this sounds like our Jewish blessing, the Shehechianu, that's intentional. There's this presence. And so I want to bless you to realize that there has been and that there is this mysterious divine presence that has kept you alive and sustained you to this day. And that's guided you to this leg of your journey. But hasn't just guided you to this leg of your journey, has brought you to this very moment. I bless you to realize and to feel that deeply.